Welcome back to another episode of Cozypreneur. This episode is all about AI and ChatGPT and how I actually use ChatGPT not to replace writing, but to use it as a tool to make the process faster, more creative, and way less stressful. So if you are wondering, how do I use ChatGPT and not sound like a robot? Then this episode is for you. Welcome back to another episode of the Cozypreneur podcast. If this is your first time listening, Cozypreneur is all about helping you make money and work with the dreamiest of clients. So grab your beverage, get your cozy socks on, and let's dive in. So I want to talk a little bit about pre-ChatGPT. I will say business owners have it good nowadays. It's a little bit easier. It's a lot easier with ChatGPT. When I first started, it was like right before the AI boom, right before ChatGPT came out, maybe like 6 months before. I really had to rely on swipe files. So swipe files are examples of what you could write. And if I had a client that was like, write me a launch sequence and I had to start from scratch, it would take me forever. Even today, it would take me forever. And so what I would do and what I still do, but now with the help of ChatGPT, is I actually will grab a swipe file and use that as my foundation. So even if it's for a different client, I have the swipe file that's going to help me structure the copy in a way that makes sense and a way that's going to move people along the customer journey. So I would always start with a swipe file. So I would never be starting from scratch. Put the swipe file in a Google Doc, change everything so it makes sense for the new client. And then I would read it and I would start to rearrange things in like a puzzle piece, right? So like now I had all the right pieces, but now it was about making it flow and making it sound really good, which interestingly enough, I think where most people struggle is like a few things, right? Like one is, what do you say? And once you know what to say, it's how do you structure it? That's kind of like the next big challenge when people are writing their own copy. So when ChatGPT first came out, I'll be honest, I was not pro AI at the beginning for a few reasons. One, the environmental concerns. So AI does use a lot of water compared to like a simple Google search. So that is something that is always in the back of my mind because I am a big recycler and try to take care of the planet as much as I can. But the other part of it is I felt like it slowed me down. I had a system. I was using my swipe file to copy system. And when I was using ChatGPT, I just felt like it was slowing me down. Like it was taking those swipe files and it was turning them into trash. And I was spending a lot of time fixing it versus like I could have just been writing it in the first place. And so it took me a while to get good at ChatGPT. And I would say the biggest thing that people don't do that makes ChatGPT really, really good is uploading your old stuff. So for example, if you are launching your membership, I would take all of your past membership launches, upload them into ChatGPT, and then prompt ChatGPT, because then it's going to have so much of your voice to pull from, so much of your messaging to pull from, and it's going to get you a lot closer to where you want to be. That is a huge piece of what changed for me and why I actually started using it more in my work. So the other piece is I upgraded, right? So I was like, I guess I will finally pay for ChatGPT Pro. What a good investment. I can't believe I didn't do it sooner. It's funny because the other thing that I was going to mention is when I started, ChatGPT wasn't around. In that first year, towards the end of that first year in business, that's when ChatGPT really became huge. And it was everybody asking me, are you worried that copywriting is going to go away? Like, people being like, ChatGPT is going to replace you. Are you concerned? If I had $1 for every time somebody asked me that, I don't know, I could probably buy myself dinner. But I think the mindset around ChatGPT is that people were really thinking about it. And I think people still do think about it as a replacement, but it is not a replacement. It is a tool. And I've talked to my husband about this, where it's like, okay, it's kind of like calculators. But I bet people were like, oh, calculators are bad because, you're not doing the math in your head. So blah, blah, blah. But really, like, all calculators do is like, one, make math more accessible for people who don't have the skills to do everything in their head. Not that it's not important, but two, it also makes like the advanced math people who are doing all of these crazy things, they can do way more because now they have a calculator and they're not spending their time trying to figure out what like 27 versus times 43 is. I'm thinking about ChatGPT very similarly, where it's like, you have to know how to do the skills in order to make it work really well. And if you don't have the skills, it'll give you something. It's just not going to be that good. So the way that I approach it really is treating ChatGPT like a thought partner and using it as a tool. And so the way I have it organized inside is I have folders for each client. I have a folder for my podcast. I have a folder for my other podcast, Unapologetically First Gen, folders for each of my offers. And so then within each of those folders, I plug in things. So like for my clients, all of the old copy that I've written for them gets plugged into ChatGPT so that when it helps me write the new copy, all of that's already in there. It has that memory. So I think the other thing where people mess up is, we're talking about using it as a tool, not a replacement. So instead of saying, hey, write me this sales page, be like, hey, here's the copy for the top of my sales page. My goals are to talk about the problems, why they matter, and the solution. What am I missing? What suggestions do you have for me? That's a great way to revise. Another thing I love doing inside ChatGPT is saying, hey, I am trying to outline this podcast episode, and here are my initial thoughts, and I'll just brainstorm. Here are the things that I want to include. Then I say, what questions can you ask me to make this stronger? And then I actually spend some time answering those questions. And then I say, hey, ChatGPT, outline this podcast based on everything that, I have said, outline this podcast in a way that flows and makes sense. Does that mean that I'm not going to edit the outline? No, like I'm still going to probably edit that outline, but it's going to save me so much time because, when I talk about copywriting being like a puzzle and like rearranging things so that they flow, so that they make sense, that is something that takes the most amount of time. And honestly, inside Copy Classroom, that's probably what I do the most for my clients is helping them restructure things so that they flow. So a big thing is not asking it necessarily to write for you, but asking it to refine things for you and giving you specific feedback. So I wouldn't necessarily be like, hey, ChatGPT, make this better, but I might say, hey, is the structure clear? Or I might say, hey, ChatGPT, my ideal client is XYZ. How can I make this more applicable to them? How can I make sure that this copy is speaking directly to them? And that's also where like you're getting some feedback from ChatGPT. And remember, ChatGPT is taking what information you have fed them plus what the internet has fed them and giving you an answer. And so you don't necessarily want to take everything that ChatGPT says. There is a good amount of evaluation and critique that you need to do on your end of like, hey, does this make sense for my audience? Does this make sense? Does it align with my brand? Is this actually something that I would say? I think things like that are really helpful. But I will say, like, I think getting AI to structure things for you, find patterns for you is super, super helpful and saves a lot of time. And then as you're writing, making sure that you're giving feedback. So one of the things that I do, so say I'm writing an email sequence and I'll be like, hey, I want to write this email sequence. These are the goals of the email sequence. This is who it's for. Some ideas that I have that I want to include for sure are XYZ, and help me outline, right? And so, or maybe what are some questions that you can ask me to make this outline stronger? And then from there, it's going to give you things. And I think this is my favorite prompt because I get so annoyed when ChatGPT is like writing, and it's all wrong and I hate it. And I'm like, now I'm just sitting here waiting for it to finish so I can reprompt it. I always ask it to do one email at a time. And that just gives you a lot of opportunity to give it feedback. So, hey, one email at a time. Then you take that email, you adapt it, you make it better, and you post it back in and you say, hey, ChatGPT, here's the revised email. And it'll be like, oh, great job. And I'm like, thanks, ChatGPT. I'm so good at my job. But then if you do it email by email, it's going to take your feedback into the next email. So like maybe that first email, it's going to take a lot of revision. But as you get to like the fifth and sixth email, it's going to have a better idea of what's going on and what you want the structure to look like and what are the messages that you want to get across. I think that is a huge part of it, is not asking ChatGPT to do everything at once. Because if you're like, hey, write me my whole email sequence, write me my whole sales page, it's going to give you trash because it doesn't know, right? It doesn't know. If you know, okay, so the structure of my sales page is I'm going to talk about the problems, I'm going to talk about why they matter, and I'm going to talk about the solution, and then I'm going to talk about my offer. Have ChatGPT write each of those sections for you. You know, hey, I need a short section on the problems my ideal clients experience. Ask me some questions. That is going to give you much, much better copy than if you're like, hey, write me a sales page. ChatGPT is not good at writing sales pages unless you specifically prompt it to give you the different pieces of a sales page that you need. Another common mistake people make is copying and pasting without editing. Like, of course, it's going to sound generic if you just copied and pasted it out of ChatGPT because other people are copying and pasting it. And so making sure that like you are either providing enough information and details inside ChatGPT, or just doing a good amount of rewriting yourself so that it does sound like you. It does sound like something your brand would say versus everyone else who does the same thing as you and is also using ChatGPT. So when you think about ChatGPT as a tool, you're not like outsourcing your writing to ChatGPT. You still have to go through all of the pieces of the writing process, right? You still have to brainstorm. ChatGPT, awesome for brainstorming, right? Ask it to ask you questions. Then you have to draft. ChatGPT, also great at drafting, gives you something to start with. Then you have to edit. This is probably where you're going to spend the most amount of your time. Well, maybe also in brainstorming. Edit and revising, because that's really where you're like, hey, how can I make this sound like me? How can I make sure that all the messages I want are on there? How can I make sure that this is on brand? And AI can help with every single one of these steps, right? You can ask it to revise your writing. You can ask it to edit your writing. You can ask it for specific feedback, but you still need to go through all of the process. If you skip brainstorming and you're not feeding AI with all of the ideas that you have for what you want to say, it's just going to take stuff off the internet, and that's going to make you sound like everybody else, right? If you brainstorm, but then you don't edit the drafts, it's still going to sound like everybody on the internet because you need to insert yourself into the process. Otherwise, it's not going to be good. And then when in doubt, feed ChatGPT more things. I would say like, you know, every time you write a launch campaign or a sales page, or I don't know, you don't need to like necessarily input all of your blog posts in there, but throw in some emails, you know, make sure that your ChatGPT knows like, what does your brand sound like? What is your brand voice? Another thing you can do is when you make all of those folders for ChatGPT, if you have ChatGPT Pro, so I have folders for all of my clients and all of me, all of those folders, there's instructions for the ChatGPT. And so one of the things that you can do if you're like, wait, I don't know what instructions to give them some of your emails and then be like, hey, tell me about the brand voice. Tell me about the tone of these emails. And then in your ChatGPT instructions, be like, hey, this is the ideal client for these people. This is the brand voice. And you can just use what it gave you. Please use that for all future chats, right? And so then it's going to update the memory, and then you don't have to update it every single time. You can kind of just add to it and give it directions. Like I know for a fact that mine is like, please stop giving me so many bullet points. You give so many bullet points. I just want like I like some good bullet points for the skimmers, but I don't need everything to be bullet pointed. So, you have to give ChatGPT this feedback. I've also been like, please stop giving me this emoji. It is not an emoji I would ever pick for myself. And so it's funny because when you start using it, it starts kind of like sounding like you. And so it starts talking to me like I would talk to other people. And ChatGPT is very supportive of my work. And it's funny because I'm like, oh, it's exactly how I would talk to my clients. I'm like, oh my God, this is so good. ChatGPT overall is a really great tool. It is really helpful for getting unstuck. It is really helpful for moving through the stages of the writing process a lot faster. You don't spend a lot of time second guessing. You can brainstorm without pressure, right? Like I just brainstorm into ChatGPT and I'm like, here's all of my thoughts and here's what I want to do. And then I'm not like thinking like, oh no, like this Google Doc doesn't look right. Like I am not structuring this in the right way. It helps me move through the process so much faster and more intentionally and thoughtfully, right? Because it always like having ChatGPT ask me questions forces me to stop and pause and think about what I'm doing even more. And if you are inside Copy Classroom or want to be inside Copy Classroom, I have a custom ChatGPT tool. It's called the Copy Rubric Companion, and you basically can plug in any copywriting, an email, some launch copy, whatever it is, and it will evaluate your copy based on my copy rubric. And so it gives you rubric based feedback. You can even ask it to like rewrite it based on the rubric. So it's kind of like having a little editor for your own things. And of course, I am also the editor inside Copy Classroom, but it's a fun little tool to play with as well. So with all of that being said, ChatGPT isn't like a magic transformational replacement for any writing that you do. If you are being like, hey, ChatGPT, write me an email and taking that email and sending it to your people, it's probably not going to hit unless you're making sure that you do go through the whole writing process. So that is brainstorming, right? Have it ask you questions. That is drafting. Have it draft after it asks you questions, give it feedback on what it drafts, rewrite things for it, and continuously update the knowledge that ChatGPT has. So making sure you're updating revised versions of what they gave you and letting it know, hey, this is more what I was thinking, because then it's going to get better and better over time. And then it becomes really cool when it really captures your voice and your messaging. So with all of this being said, you still have to think. You cannot just copy and paste, unfortunately. You still have to edit. You still have to go through the whole writing process, but it does make the whole writing process a lot easier. And if you are somebody who needs help using ChatGPT in your own business, come join us inside Copy Classroom. You get access to the Copy Rubric Companion GPT, and you get access to me, who will revise and edit your writing for you so you can actually improve your writing and understand why you're writing what you're writing and not just automating the whole process. If you have any questions about ChatGPT or how I use it, I would love to hear from you. Or if you want to share how you use it, DM me, let me know. And thank you so much for listening. Until next time. That's a wrap on today's episode. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to rate and leave a review on your preferred listening platform. If you haven't, make sure you subscribe for weekly episodes about how to make money and work with the dreamiest of clients without having to get dressed in the morning. Make sure to check out the show notes down below, and I'll see you in the next episode.